Real control doesn't begin when your thoughts change. It begins the moment you realize they were never you. Think about how often a single thought has shaped your entire day. One comment from a coworker replays in your head for hours. One mistake turns into a story about how you're not good enough. One fear about the future spirals into anxiety before anything has even happened. And the strange part is this: you rarely question the voice behind those thoughts. You assume it's you. But what if it isn't? What if the constant commentary in your head, the criticism, the doubt, the sudden worries, the emotional reactions, is not your identity, but simply mental noise? Most people go through life completely identified with their thoughts. If they think, "I'm not ready," they believe it. If they think, "This will fail," they retreat. If they think, "They don't respect me," they react. Thought becomes truth. Truth becomes emotion. Emotion becomes behavior. And then behavior becomes destiny. But here's the truth that changes everything. A thought is not a command. It's an event. It appears, it passes, and you get to decide what happens next. The problem is not that you have negative thoughts. The problem is that you believe every single one of them. Your mind is built for survival, not success. It scans for threats. It predicts worst-case scenarios. It remembers embarrassment more vividly than praise. It replays mistakes longer than victories. Knew that mechanism kept your ancestors alive, but in the modern world, it often keeps you small. The mind reacts fast. Awareness moves slower, and in that difference lies your power. There is a space, small at first, almost invisible, between a thought and your response to it. Most people never notice that space. They jump from thought to reaction instantly. They feel something and they act. They assume something and they speak. They fear something and they withdraw. But leaders of their own lives do something different. They pause, not to suppress, not to deny, but to observe. When you begin to observe your thoughts instead of automatically obeying them, something extraordinary happens. You start to see patterns. You notice the same fear repeating, the same doubt, the same internal script. And instead of saying, "This is who I am," and instead of saying, "This is who I am," you begin to say, "This is just something my mind is producing." That shift changes everything. You are not the voice. You're the one who hears it. You are not the anxiety. You are the awareness noticing it. You are not the anger. You are the presence choosing what to do with it. This is not about becoming emotionless. It is not about pretending thoughts don't exist. It is about developing a relationship with your mind where you lead it, instead of letting it lead you. For the next hour, we are not going to try to silence your thoughts. That's impossible. The mind thinks. That's its job. Instead, we're going to do something more powerful. We're going to separate who you are from what you think. You'll learn why thoughts feel so convincing, why emotions rise so quickly, why overthinking feels uncontrollable, and most importantly, how to take back control without fighting yourself. Because control does not come from force. It comes from clarity. And clarity begins with one realization. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who decides which thoughts deserve action. Once you see that clearly, your reactions change. Your emotions stabilize. Your decisions become intentional. And your life begins to move from autopilot to leadership. This is not abstract philosophy. This is practical mental training. Every time you pause before reacting, you strengthen control. Every time you label a thought instead of believing it, you strengthen awareness. Every time you choose a response instead of surrendering to impulse, you strengthen identity. The question is no longer, how do I stop thinking? The question becomes, who is in charge? And by the end of this journey, that answer will be clear. Not the voice, not the fear, not the noise. You. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The voice in your head is not you. There is a voice in your head that has been speaking for as long as you can remember. It comments on everything. It evaluates. It predicts. It criticizes. It replays conversations long after they've ended. Sometimes it encourages you. Often it doubts you. And because it sounds like you assume it is you. But let's slow this down. If you can hear that voice, who is listening? If a thought says, "You're not ready," and you notice it, and then there are two things happening. There is the thought itself, and there is the awareness of the thought. Those are not the same thing. Most people never separate the two. Imagine sitting alone in a quiet room. Suddenly, a thought appears. What if I fail? You didn't schedule it. You didn't consciously create it. It simply arrived. Then another follows. You always mess things up. And another, you should have done better. They come automatically. Now ask yourself honestly, did you choose those sentences? Or did they simply arise? This is the first crack in the illusion. Thoughts appear, you witness them, but you are not consciously manufacturing each one. They emerge from memory, conditioning, fear, habit, and subconscious patterning. Yet the moment they appear, you merge with them. The thought says, "I'm not confident." And instead of observing it, you become it. But a thought is just mental activity. It is a sentence in the mind. It is electrical and chemical signals firing based on past experiences. It is not your identity. Think of your mind like a radio playing in the background. Sometimes it plays motivational music. Sometimes it plays static. Sometimes it broadcasts old recordings from your childhood. But the radio is not the room. And it is not the listener. You are the listener. The problem is that most people live as if they are the radio. A man walks into a meeting and thinks, "They don't respect me." Instantly, his body tightens. His tone changes. He withdraws or becomes defensive. The thought felt real, so he treated it as truth. But what if that thought was just an interpretation? What if it was simply old insecurity replaying itself? Another person sends a message and doesn't get a reply for hours. The mind says, they're ignoring you. Emotion follows. Anxiety rises. But in reality, nothing has happened except silence. The suffering came from the thought, not the event. The voice in your head is constantly interpreting reality, but interpretation is not fact. This is where awareness begins. When you start noticing the voice instead of automatically agreeing with it, you create separation. That separation is small at first, almost fragile, but it is powerful. Instead of saying, "I am anxious," you say, "There is anxiety present." Instead of saying, "I am a failure," you say, "I'm having a thought about failure." That subtle shift changes your relationship with your own mind. You move from identification to observation, and observation gives you power. Consider this carefully. If you truly were your thoughts, you wouldn't be able to observe them. A knife cannot cut itself. An eye cannot see itself directly. The very fact that you can step back and notice your thinking proves that you are something deeper than the thinking itself. You are the awareness behind it. When you begin to live from that awareness, emotional reactivity starts to weaken. Not because thoughts disappear, but because you stop treating every thought as an order. The voice might say, "You're not good enough." But awareness responds, "That's a familiar pattern." The voice might say, "This will go wrong." Awareness answers, "That's fear trying to protect me." You don't suppress the voice. You don't fight it. You simply stop obeying it blindly. For many people, this realization is uncomfortable at first. If you are not your thoughts, then who are you? You are the one who chooses. You are the one who directs attention. You are the one who decides whether a thought becomes action. The voice can suggest. It can warn. It can replay old pain. But it cannot move your body without your agreement. It cannot speak out loud without your permission. It cannot send the message, quit the job, end the relationship, or lash out in anger unless you follow it. That is where control begins. Not in silencing the mind, not in eliminating negative thoughts, but in recognizing their place. Thoughts are advisors. Some are wise, some are outdated, some are afraid, but none of them are you. Imagine standing on a busy street watching cars pass by. Each car is a thought. Some are loud, some are quiet, some move slowly, some race past. You wouldn't chase every car. You wouldn't jump in front of each one. You simply observe. Now imagine doing the same with your mind. A thought passes. You're behind in life. Another, they're doing better than you. Another, you should have started earlier. Instead of climbing into each thought and letting it drive your mood, you watch it move. That watching is awareness, and awareness is stability. The more you practice observing your thoughts, the more you notice patterns. You'll see recurring themes: comparison, fear, perfectionism, approval-seeking. You'll realize the voice is not creative. It repeats itself. It uses old scripts. When you see the script, you stop being controlled by it. This is the foundation of mental strength. Not positive thinking, not forced optimism, but clear separation between who you are and what your mind produces. You are not the voice. You are the witness of it. And once you understand that deeply, not just intellectually, but experientially, something shifts. The voice may still speak, but it no longer dominates. Control begins the moment identification ends. And in the next chapter, we'll go deeper into why the mind feels so automatic, and how to interrupt that autopilot before it runs your life. Chapter 2. The illusion of automatic thinking. Most of your thoughts feel automatic. They appear instantly. They feel convincing, and they trigger emotion before you even realize what happened. Someone makes a comment. Irritation rises. You see someone's success. Comparison begins. You make a mistake. Self-criticism activates. It feels immediate, almost mechanical. And because it feels automatic, you assume it's uncontrollable. But automatic does not mean authoritative. Let's break this down carefully. Your brain is designed to predict and react quickly. Long before you developed complex reasoning, your nervous system evolved to scan for danger. Survival required speed. If something moved in the bushes, hesitation could mean death. So the brain developed shortcuts: pattern recognition, rapid interpretation, emotional signaling. That ancient system still runs today. The problem is, modern life is not a jungle. A delayed text message is not a predator. A constructive criticism is not a life-threatening attack. Uncertainty about the future is not immediate danger. Yet your brain often reacts as if it is. This is the illusion of automatic thinking. The mind reacts fast, but speed is not the same as accuracy. When someone ignores you, your mind may instantly conclude, "They don't respect me." When you fail at something, it may declare, "You're not capable." When something uncertain appears, it may shout, "This will go wrong." But these are interpretations, not facts. The speed of the thought gives it authority. But speed is just habit. Imagine a smoke alarm that goes off every time you cook. The alarm is loud, urgent, impossible to ignore. But after a while, you realize it's not signaling fire. It's reacting to steam. Your mind works the same way. It sounds the alarm quickly, but it doesn't always assess correctly. If you don't question the alarm, you live in constant reactivity. So here's what usually happens. Event to automatic, thought to emotion to reaction. The entire chain can happen in seconds. You don't pause between the thought and the emotion. You assume the thought caused the emotion because it was true. But what if the thought was simply a habit? Habits of thinking form over years. If you were criticized often, your mind may default to self-criticism. If you were rejected, it may scan for signs of abandonment. If you experienced instability, it may constantly anticipate loss. These patterns feel like personality, but they are conditioning. Conditioning can be observed, and what can be observed can be interrupted. Let's explore something powerful. The next time a strong emotion arises, don't focus on the emotion first. Ask yourself, what thought appeared just before this feeling? If you feel anxious, what did your mind just say? Maybe it said, I can't handle this. Maybe it said, something bad is going to happen. Maybe it said, oh, I'm not prepared. The thought came first, but because it arrived so quickly, you merged with it. This is where awareness changes the sequence. Instead of event to thought, to emotion, to reaction, you create event to thought, to awareness, to choice. That small insertion, awareness, breaks the illusion of inevitability. You begin to see that your first thought is not necessarily your best thought. It's just your fastest. Fast thinking is often protective thinking. It leans toward caution, not it exaggerates risk. It highlights flaws. It anticipates worst-case scenarios. Slow thinking evaluates. Automatic thinking reacts. Intentional thinking decides. Consider a simple example. You send a proposal. Intentional thinking decides. Consider a simple example. You send a proposal. Hours pass with no response. The mind says, they hated it. Anxiety builds. Pause. Is that a fact? Or is that the fastest possible explanation your mind could produce? The truth might be neutral. They're busy. They haven't seen it. They're considering it carefully. But the automatic system doesn't wait for nuance. It fills the silence quickly. When you realize this, you stop treating every initial thought as reality. You start asking questions. Is this thought helpful? Is this thought proven? Is this thought coming from fear or from clarity? You don't need to eliminate automatic thoughts. That's impossible. The brain will continue producing them. The goal is to reduce blind obedience. And there is a powerful rule you can begin using immediately. The first thought is a suggestion. The second thought is a choice. The first one appears automatically. The second one requires awareness. For example, first thought, I'm terrible at this. Second thought, that's frustration speaking. Let's improve. First thought, they don't like me. Second thought, that's an assumption. I don't have enough data. First thought, this is too hard. Second thought, it's uncomfortable. Not impossible. That second thought is leadership. Most people live entirely inside the first thought. That's why their emotions feel uncontrollable. That's why their reactions feel justified. That's why they believe they are just this way. But you are not your first thought. You're the one capable of producing the second. And when you begin consistently choosing the second thought, the reflective one, something changes. Emotions stabilize. Reactions slow down. Clarity increases. You begin to feel less trapped inside your own head. Automatic thinking loses its dominance when it is exposed. So here is your practice. For the next few days, notice your first reaction in any stressful moment. Don't fight it. Don't judge it. Just identify it. Then deliberately create a second response. That second response is where control lives, because the illusion was never that you had no control. The illusion was that the first thought was final. It isn't. And in the next chapter, Sense will go even deeper into the exact space between thought and action, and how mastering that space gives you emotional power most people never develop. Chapter 3. The space between thought and action. There is a space in your life that most people never notice. It is small, it is quiet, and it exists between a thought and what you do next. Inside that space lies your freedom. Most people believe their emotions control their behavior. They say, "I was angry, so I reacted," or "I felt anxious, so I avoided it." But anger did not move your body. Anxiety did not send the message. A thought triggered an emotion, and then you acted. Between those two steps, there was a gap. It may have lasted less than a second, but it was there. The problem is not that the gap doesn't exist. The problem is that it's untrained. Imagine driving a car with no brake sensitivity. The moment you touch the pedal, the car slams to a stop. No control, no smoothness, just reaction. That's how many people operate emotionally. Something happens. They react fully and instantly. But emotional maturity is the ability to feel without immediately acting. And that ability is built in the pause. Let's examine a common scenario. Someone criticizes you in front of others. Instantly, your mind produces thoughts. They're disrespecting me. I need to defend myself. This is unfair. Emotion rises. Heat builds. Your body prepares to respond. In that moment, most people speak. But what if you paused? Not to suppress your anger, not to pretend you're calm, but simply to breathe, to observe the surge, to recognize, look, this is a reaction forming. That pause might only be 3 seconds, but those 3 seconds separate impulse from intention. In those 3 seconds you ask, what outcome do I want here? Is reacting immediately going to serve me? What response aligns with who I want to be? That is control. The pause does not eliminate emotion. It gives you authority over it. Many people fear the pause because they think it makes them weak. They believe reacting instantly shows confidence. But instant reaction often reveals insecurity. Controlled response signals strength. Think of someone you consider powerful, calm, grounded. They think, then they speak. That gap is visible. The ability to pause under pressure is not personality. It is training, and it begins with awareness of physical signals. Before you react, your body tells you. Heart rate increases, muscles tighten, breath shortens, as your nervous system activates before your words do. If you can catch the body, you can slow the mind. Here is a practical framework you can use immediately. Pause, breathe, name, choose. Pause, do nothing for 3 seconds. Breathe, slow your breath deliberately. Name, identify the emotion. This is frustration. Choose, decide your response intentionally. Naming the emotion is critical. Research in psychology shows that labeling feelings reduces their intensity. When you say, "This is anger," instead of "I am angry," you create distance. Distance reduces dominance. The emotion no longer feels like identity. It becomes an experience. Let's take another example. You wake up feeling unmotivated. A thought appears. "I don't feel like working today." Instantly, your energy drops. You consider procrastinating. Pause. Is the feeling a command, or is it a temporary state? Most successful individuals are not free from resistance, because they simply don't let temporary emotions dictate permanent decisions. In the space between "I don't feel like it" and quitting, there is a choice. You can say, "That's a feeling, not a rule." This is how discipline is built, not by eliminating emotion, but by separating it from action. The mind often confuses discomfort with danger. If something feels uncomfortable, it suggests avoidance. If something feels uncertain, it suggests retreat. But growth lives on the other side of discomfort, and the pause allows you to differentiate. Is this actual danger, or is this just discomfort? Without the pause, you never ask. Consider how many regrets in life come from reacting too quickly. Words said in anger, decisions made in fear, opportunities missed because of self-doubt. All of them pass through the gap. Your reactions become rarer and more intentional. You don't send the message immediately. You don't quit in the heat of emotion. You don't escalate conflict without reflection. You choose timing. Timing is power. There is a reason experienced negotiators, leaders, and strategists are comfortable with silence. Silence creates space, and space forces clarity. In conversation, a pause can shift dynamics. Instead of interrupting, you wait. Instead of defending, you ask a question. Instead of reacting emotionally, you respond calmly. The other person feels it. Calm response disrupts emotional escalation. The same principle applies internally. When your mind throws a negative thought at you, you don't need to argue with it. You don't need to crush it. You just don't need to act on it immediately. Let it sit. Observe it. Watch how it loses intensity when not fueled by action. Emotions are waves. If you react instantly, you amplify them. If you pause, they peak and fall naturally. Many people think they need to control their emotions, but what they actually need is to control their timing. And timing determines outcome. The space between thought and action is where character is built, not in comfort, not in calm days, but in the exact moment when reaction feels justified. Anyone can be composed when nothing challenges them. Control is tested when the impulse is strong. So here is your practice. In the next week, choose one area where you often react automatically. Maybe criticism, delay, rejection, or frustration. Commit to inserting a deliberate 3-second pause before responding. You may feel the urge intensify at first. That's normal. Your nervous system is used to immediate release. But if you hold the pause, you'll discover something powerful. The urge is not permanent. It rises, it peaks, it fades. And in that fading, you realize something. You are never controlled by the emotion. You are controlled by the absence of space. Once you reclaim that space, you reclaim authority. And as we move forward, we'll explore why your mind is wired more for survival than for success, and how understanding that wiring helps you stop mistaking fear for truth. Chapter 4. Your mind is wired for survival, not success. If you truly want to take back control, you must understand something fundamental. Your mind is not designed to make you fulfilled. It is designed to keep you alive. That difference explains almost everything. Thousands of years ago, survival depended on constant vigilance. The human brain evolved to detect threats quickly, assume the worst, and react fast. If you underestimated danger, you died. If you overestimated it, you survived. So the brain learned to lean toward negativity. It scans for what might go wrong. It highlights risk more than reward. It remembers embarrassment more vividly than praise. It replays mistakes longer than victories. That system still operates today, but modern threats are rarely physical. You're not running from predators. You are navigating opinions, uncertainty, competition, and social judgment. Yet your brain often reacts as if criticism is a tiger, as if failure is fatal, and as if rejection is life-threatening. This is why fear feels so real. Your mind does not differentiate well between physical danger and psychological discomfort. It treats both as signals requiring urgent attention. Imagine you're about to speak in public. Your heart rate increases. Your palms sweat. Your thoughts say, you're going to embarrass yourself. Your body reacts as if survival is at stake. But is your life in danger? No. Your reputation might feel vulnerable. Your ego might feel exposed. But those are not fatal threats. The survival brain exaggerates. And when you don't understand that exaggeration, you obey it. You cancel opportunities. You avoid challenges. You retreat from growth, not because you're incapable, but because your brain prioritizes safety over expansion. Success requires discomfort. Survival seeks comfort. There is a constant tension between the two. When your mind says, stay where it's safe, awareness must ask, safe from what? Many of the fears you experience are projections. They are imagined scenarios based on past pain or future uncertainty. The brain fills in gaps quickly. For example, you consider starting a business. Thought, what if it fails? Emotion, anxiety. Action, hesitation. But that thought is not a prediction. It is a protective mechanism. Or you consider expressing your true opinion. Thought, they won't like you. Emotion, fear, action, silence. Again, maybe the brain prioritizes social safety. In ancient times, being rejected by the tribe could mean death. So the brain developed strong sensitivity to social exclusion. Today, disagreement is not exile, but the brain reacts as if it might be. This is why growth feels uncomfortable. You're stepping beyond what your survival system considers secure. Understanding this changes how you interpret fear. Instead of saying, this fear means I shouldn't do it, you begin to ask, is this danger or is this discomfort? Danger requires protection. Discomfort often signals growth. The problem is that they feel similar. Your heart races in both situations. Your thoughts become intense in both situations. Your body activates in both situations. But one is protective, the other is restrictive. Without awareness, you treat them the same. Let's look at another example. You make a mistake at work. Your mind says, they're going to think you're incompetent. Shame rises. You replay the moment repeatedly. From a survival perspective, this makes sense. Your brain wants to prevent future social rejection, so it magnifies the event. But does replaying it endlessly improve performance? Shame rises. You replay the moment repeatedly. From a survival perspective, this makes sense. Your brain wants to prevent future social rejection, so it magnifies the event. But does replaying it endlessly improve performance? No. It drains energy. The survival brain overcorrects. It believes intensity equals prevention. But awareness understands that learning is more effective than rumination. Here is the key shift. Your mind's first priority is safety. Your responsibility is alignment. Alignment means choosing actions based on values, not fear. If you value growth, you will often act despite discomfort. If you value integrity, you will speak even when nervous. If you value progress, you will risk failure. Your survival system will resist each of these. That resistance does not mean you are wrong. It means you are stretching beyond default wiring. High performers understand this intuitively. They do not interpret fear as a stop sign, but they interpret it as a signal that something meaningful is at stake. Fear becomes information, not authority. When your mind says, this could go wrong, awareness responds, that's a possibility, but not a certainty. When your mind says, stay small, awareness asks, is small aligned with who I want to become? The survival brain wants predictability. Success requires uncertainty. The survival brain prefers repetition. Growth requires experimentation. The survival brain wants approval. The leadership requires independence. Once you understand this, you stop expecting your mind to automatically support your ambitions. It won't. Its job is to prevent loss, not maximize potential. This realization removes frustration. You stop asking, why do I feel scared? Instead, you recognize, of course I feel resistance. I'm doing something new. That resistance becomes normal. And when resistance becomes normal, it loses its power. You begin to see fear as part of the process, not a verdict against your capability. The control returns when you stop confusing survival signals with strategic decisions. Before you withdraw, ask, is this truly dangerous, or is it simply uncomfortable? Before you avoid, ask, am I protecting myself or limiting myself? Before you retreat, ask, is this aligned with fear or with growth? The more you separate survival wiring from conscious intention, the more freedom you gain. You are not trying to eliminate your survival system. It is valuable. It keeps you safe from real threats. But you must learn to distinguish real threats from imagined ones. Because many of the limitations in your life are not imposed by reality. They are imposed by an overactive safety system, and when you learn to see that clearly, you stop fighting yourself. You stop thinking, I'm weak for feeling fear. Instead, you think, my brain is doing its job, now I will do mine. Your job is to choose alignment over instinct. Your job is to act according to values, not automatic alarm systems. Your job is to lead. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to stop believing every thought your survival brain produces, and how questioning those narratives transforms your emotional stability. Chapter 5. Stop believing. The most dangerous habit you have is not negative thinking. It is unquestioned thinking. Most people do not suffer because they think negatively. They suffer because they believe automatically. A thought appears, and it is accepted as truth. I'm not good enough. They don't respect me. This always happens to me. I'll probably fail. There is no investigation, no cross-examination, no pause, just belief, and belief fuels emotion. That emotion fuels behavior. Behavior shapes reality. The mind produces thousands of thoughts per day. Some are useful, many are repetitive, some are irrational. Yet most of them pass through your awareness unchecked, shaping your mood and decisions without permission. The first step toward control is understanding this. A thought is not a fact. It is a mental proposal. It suggests an interpretation of reality, but it is not reality itself. Imagine a lawyer presenting a case in court, and that lawyer argues confidently. They use emotional language. They sound persuasive. But until evidence is examined and the judge evaluates the claim, nothing is proven. Your mind works like that lawyer. It presents arguments constantly. You embarrassed yourself. They're better than you. This is going to end badly. It speaks with conviction, but conviction is not evidence. If you never question the lawyer, you live as if every argument is true. This is how self-doubt becomes identity. This is how insecurity becomes personality. This is how anxiety becomes who you are. But the moment you begin questioning your thoughts, the spell weakens. Let's look at how this works in real life. You send someone a message. Hours pass with no reply. Your mind says they're ignoring you. Emotion rises. Irritation, insecurity, maybe even resentment. Pause. What is the evidence? Do you know they're ignoring you? Or is that simply one possible explanation? There could be dozens of neutral reasons. Busy. Phone on silent. Unexpected interruption. But your mind chose the one that triggered emotion. Why? Because it is wired for threat detection. Silence could signal social rejection, so it reacts quickly. But when you ask, is this proven? You weaken the automatic belief. Another example. You make a mistake at work. Your mind says, you're incompetent. Shame appears instantly. Pause. Is that accurate? Or did you simply make one error? The mind tends to globalize. It turns one event into a permanent identity. From I made a mistake to I am a mistake. That shift happens automatically, unless you interrupt it. Here is a simple but powerful tool. Instead of saying, this is true, ask, is this absolutely true? That question creates distance. If the answer is no, or even uncertain, the thought loses authority. You don't need to replace every negative thought with forced positivity. That often feels artificial. Instead, you move toward neutrality. From "I'm terrible at this" to "I'm still improving." From "they don't respect me" to "I don't have enough information." From "this will fail" to "there is risk, but there is also possibility." Neutral thinking stabilizes emotion without denial. When you stop believing every thought, your emotional landscape becomes less volatile. Think of it this way. If every thought is believed, your mood depends entirely on mental noise. If thoughts are questioned, your mood depends on that keeps people trapped. Repetition. The mind repeats certain narratives over and over. I'm behind. I should be further. I always mess this up. Repetition creates familiarity. Familiarity creates comfort. Comfort creates false credibility. Just because a thought is familiar does not make it accurate. In fact, the most damaging beliefs are often the most rehearsed. If you've repeated a narrative for years, it feels like truth. But it may simply be conditioning. Conditioning can be rewritten, but first, it must be identified. Pay attention to recurring themes in your thinking. Do you constantly anticipate rejection? Do you assume criticism? Do you expect failure? Those patterns are not destiny. They are scripts. Scripts can be edited. Here's a practice. Write down 3 thoughts that frequently disturb your peace. Now ask, where did this belief originate? Is it based on repeated evidence or a few painful memories? Would I say this to someone I care about? Often, you will find that you hold yourself to harsher standards than anyone else. The inner voice may be loud, but it is not always wise. When you begin challenging it respectfully, not aggressively, it changes tone. You don't fight your thoughts. You evaluate them. Fighting creates tension. Evaluation creates clarity. There is a powerful shift that happens when you move from "I am this thought" to "I am noticing this thought." Notice the difference. "I am failing" versus "I am noticing a fear of failure." The second sentence contains awareness. Awareness weakens emotional intensity. You are no longer inside the storm. You are observing it. That observation restores stability. The goal is not to eliminate negative thoughts entirely. That is unrealistic. The goal is to stop building your identity around them. You're not the thought. You are the thinker. And more importantly, the evaluator. The more you question your mind's narratives, the more resilient you become. You are less shaken by criticism, less destabilized by uncertainty, less reactive to internal doubt. Because now you understand something powerful. A thought only controls you if you believe it without question. When belief becomes intentional instead of automatic, control returns. And in the next chapter, we'll explore how your interpretations, not events themselves, determine your emotional state, and how changing interpretation transforms your experience of reality. Chapter 6. Your interpretation creates your emotion. Most people believe emotions are caused by events. They say, "That situation made me angry. That comment hurt me. That failure crushed me." But events do not create emotion directly. Interpretation does. Between what happens and how you feel, there is a filter. That filter is meaning. The meaning you assign to an event determines your emotional reaction to it. 2 people can experience the exact same situation and feel completely different. And one person sees feedback and feels attacked. Another sees feedback and feels informed. One person sees delay and feels rejected. Another sees delay and feels patient. The event is neutral. The interpretation creates the emotion. This realization is uncomfortable at first, because it removes the illusion that others control your inner state. It shifts responsibility inward, but it also gives you power. Let's look at a simple example. You present an idea in a meeting. Someone challenges it. An interpretation. They think I'm incompetent. Emotion, embarrassment, defensiveness. Interpretation. They want clarification. Emotion, curiosity, engagement. Same event, different interpretation, different emotional outcome. Your mind automatically assigns meaning based on past experience, insecurity, or expectation. But that automatic meaning is not mandatory. It is habitual. The mind often chooses the anticipates threat, and it fills in missing information quickly, usually with negative bias. Silence becomes rejection. Criticism becomes disrespect. Failure becomes identity. But when you slow down and question the meaning, you discover flexibility. Here is the critical question. What else could this mean? That question disrupts emotional rigidity. If someone cancels plans, your mind might say, they don't value me. Pause. What else could it mean? They're overwhelmed. They're tired. Something urgent came up. Now, the alternative interpretation may be neutral or even compassionate. Compassion stabilizes emotion. Hostile interpretation escalates it. This doesn't mean you deny reality. It means you delay conclusion. The brain seeks closure quickly. It wants a story. But quick stories are often distorted. Another example, you attempt something new and it doesn't succeed. Automatic interpretation. I'm not capable. Emotion. Shame. To alternative interpretation. This is part of learning. Emotion. Determination. The difference lies entirely in narrative. You cannot always control what happens, but you can examine the meaning you attach to it. This is not positive thinking. It is accurate thinking. Accurate thinking acknowledges uncertainty. It replaces "this is terrible" with "this is challenging." It replaces "this is hopeless" with "this is difficult but workable." Small shifts in language change emotional chemistry. New language shapes perception. When you say, "This is a disaster," your nervous system activates. When you say, "This is inconvenient," the body relaxes slightly. Words carry weight internally. Many emotional reactions are intensified by exaggeration. This always happens. I never get it right. Everything is falling apart. These are cognitive distortions, overgeneralizations. When you replace always with sometimes, intensity decreases. Is when you replace never with not yet, possibility appears. Your interpretation influences not only how you feel, but what you do next. If you interpret a setback as permanent, you stop trying. If you interpret it as temporary, you adjust and continue. Interpretation determines persistence. It also determines relationships. If you assume negative intent from others, you build defensiveness. If you assume misunderstanding, you build dialogue. The meaning you assign becomes the emotional environment you live in. Most people are not overwhelmed by events. They are overwhelmed by the stories attached to those events. Here's an exercise you can begin using immediately. When you feel a strong emotional reaction, write down what happened, what you told yourself about it, how that story made you feel. Then ask, is there another reasonable interpretation? You may not feel convinced at first. That's normal. The brain prefers familiar narratives, but with repetition, flexibility increases. You begin to see that your emotional world is not fixed. It is shaped moment by moment through interpretation. This is empowering because it means emotional stability is trainable. It does not depend on controlling everyone around you. It depends on managing internal meaning. This does not excuse harmful behavior from others, and it simply recognizes that your suffering often multiplies when interpretation becomes catastrophic. Consider rejection. Rejection interpreted as "I'm unworthy" creates deep pain. Rejection interpreted as not aligned creates redirection. Same event, different emotional trajectory. When you master interpretation, you master resilience. Resilience is not emotional numbness. It is emotional intelligence. It is the ability to feel without collapsing. And it begins with questioning the first story your mind offers. Your mind may offer fear-based meaning first, that is, survival wiring. But awareness can revise it. You are not powerless against interpretation. You are the editor, and once you realize that, you stop being emotionally hostage to assumptions. Instead of reacting automatically to every mental narrative, you step back and adjust the lens. That adjustment changes the emotional tone of your entire life. In the next chapter, we'll focus on daily mental training. How to strengthen the observer consistently so that awareness becomes natural, not forced. Chapter 7. Train the observer. Daily. Understanding that you are not your thoughts is powerful, but understanding alone is not transformation. Awareness must be trained. If you do not practice observing your mind, you will default to identifying with it again. The survival system is automatic. The observer must be strengthened intentionally. Think of awareness like a muscle. If you never train it, impulses dominate. If you train it consistently, control becomes natural. Many people believe self-control is personality. They say, I'm just reactive, or I'm just emotional. But reactivity is not identity. It is untrained awareness. The observer within you already exists. You experience it every time you notice your own thinking. The problem is not absence, it is inconsistency. You notice your thoughts sometimes, usually after you've reacted. Training means noticing before, and that requires repetition. Let's begin with something simple. Set aside 5 minutes each day with no distractions. And that requires repetition. Let's begin with something simple. Set aside 5 minutes each day with no distractions. Sit quietly. Close your eyes if you prefer. Do not attempt to stop your thoughts. Do not attempt to control them. Just watch. Thoughts will appear. Plans, memories, worries, random images. Your only task is to notice them and silently label them: planning, remembering, judging, worrying. This labeling creates separation. You're not suppressing thought, you're categorizing it, and in categorizing, you reinforce identity as the observer. At first, this may feel chaotic. The mind will seem loud. That is not because it became louder. It is because you are finally paying attention. Most of the day, mental noise runs unnoticed. Now you are seeing it clearly. Do not become frustrated. Observation is the goal, not silence. Over time, something subtle happens. The space between thoughts becomes more noticeable. Reactions slow down. Awareness strengthens. But daily stillness is only one form of training. The real practice happens in real situations. Choose one trigger in your life. Something that usually causes automatic reaction. Maybe it's criticism, maybe it's delay, maybe it's someone interrupting you. For 1 week, make that trigger your training ground. Every time it happens, do not aim for perfection. Aim for awareness. Even if you react first, reflect immediately after. What thought just drove that reaction? That reflection builds recognition. Recognition builds interruption. Eventually, you will catch the reaction before it fully forms. That is progress. There is another important element of training: journaling. Each evening, write down one moment where your mind tried to control your behavior. Describe: what was the situation? What thought appeared? What emotion followed? How did you respond? What could you choose next time? This practice strengthens mental clarity. Clarity reduces repetition of mistakes. When thoughts remain unexamined, they repeat unconsciously. When examined, they lose automatic power. Another powerful daily habit is intentional redirection. Your attention is fuel. Whatever you focus on grows in intensity. If you dwell on negative thoughts repeatedly, they become dominant. If you intentionally redirect attention toward productive action, mental noise weakens. For example, just when a self-doubting thought appears, instead of arguing with it endlessly, shift attention toward behavior. What is one constructive action I can take right now? Action grounds awareness. Overthinking loses strength when energy moves into execution. Training the observer is not about thinking less, it is about identifying faster. The faster you identify mental patterns, the less time they control you. Consider professional athletes. They train physical reflexes through repetition. And under pressure, they do not think step by step. Their training takes over. Mental training works the same way. When awareness becomes habitual, you do not need to consciously remind yourself to pause. You naturally do. When interpretation becomes flexible, you do not need to force reframe. It happens automatically. When you practice separation daily, identification weakens permanently. But there is something important to understand. Progress will not be linear. Some days, you will feel in control. Other days, old patterns will resurface strongly. That does not mean you have failed. Conditioning built over decades does not disappear in weeks. Patience is part of discipline. It does not disappear in weeks. Patience is part of discipline. You are rewiring default reactions. Each moment of awareness strengthens a new pathway. Even catching a reaction after it happens is improvement. Be careful not to turn awareness into self-criticism. The goal is not to judge your thoughts. It is to observe them without attachment. And judging your mind creates another layer of thinking. I shouldn't think this way. I'm failing at control. Notice that those are thoughts too. Observe them the same way. Chapter 8. Lead your mind instead of fighting it. By now, you understand something powerful. You are not your thoughts. You can question them. You can reinterpret them. You can create space before acting on them. But there is one final shift that transforms awareness into authority. You must stop fighting your mind and start leading it. Many people approach mental control like a battle. They try to eliminate negative thoughts. They try to silence doubt. They try to crush fear. But fighting your own mind creates tension. Resistance strengthens what you resist. If you tell yourself, I shouldn't feel this way, the emotion intensifies. If you demand, stop thinking about it, the thought returns stronger. Why? Because suppression is still engagement. The mind does not respond well to force. It responds to direction. Leadership is not aggression, it is clarity. When a leader sees confusion, they do not panic. They provide direction. When a team member makes a mistake, if they do not destroy them, they correct course. Your mind requires the same approach. Instead of saying, why am I thinking this? Say, thank you for the signal. Now here's where we're going. This is internal leadership. Thought, this might fail. Leader response. Noted. We'll prepare and move forward. Thought, they might judge you. Leader response. Possible. We'll act anyway. Thought, you're not ready. Leader response. We grow by doing. Notice the tone. It is calm, it is firm, and it does not argue endlessly. Leadership sets direction. One of the most powerful ways to lead your mind is through intentional focus. Your attention is a spotlight. Whatever you shine it on becomes dominant in your perception. If you focus on risk, fear expands. If you focus on solutions, capability expands. You cannot prevent your mind from generating negative possibilities, but you can choose how long you dwell on them. When a worry appears, acknowledge it briefly, then redirect. Ask, what is within my control right now? What action aligns with my values? What is the next constructive step? Direction dissolves rumination. Overthinking often persists because there is no chosen direction. The mind circles problems endlessly when there is no decision. Even a small decision restores stability. I will take one step. I will send the email. I will practice for 30 minutes. Action shifts mental energy from speculation to execution. And another key element of leadership is setting standards for your internal dialogue. Would you allow someone else to speak to you the way your inner critic does? If not, why allow it internally? Leadership requires be harsh. Respond clearly. That's not useful. That's exaggerated. That's not aligned with who I'm becoming. You're not suppressing thought. You're establishing mental standards. And just as you would correct a team member who spreads negativity, you correct internal narratives that weaken you. This is not denial. It is discipline. There is a difference between acknowledging reality and indulging pessimism. Reality says, this is difficult. Pessimism says, this is hopeless. Reality says, you made a mistake. Pessimism says, you are a mistake. Leadership accepts the first. It rejects the second. Another powerful practice is future orientation. Instead of asking, why is this happening? Ask, who do I want to be in this situation? That question immediately shifts identity. The mind may suggest retreat, but your chosen identity may value courage. The mind may suggest defensiveness, but your identity may value composure. When identity becomes intentional, reactions become aligned. You stop reacting as a victim of thought. You respond as the author of character. Leadership also means consistency. You do not lead your mind once. You lead it daily. Some days it will resist strongly. Old patterns will surface. Fear will feel convincing. That does not mean you have lost control. It means training continues. True control is not the absence of negative thought. It is the presence of stable direction despite it. Even the most disciplined individuals experience doubt. The difference is, they do not surrender to it. They acknowledge it. Then they move forward. Imagine your mind as a powerful but undisciplined horse. If you fight it aggressively, it resists. If you ignore it, it runs wild. If you guide it patiently, it becomes strength. Your thoughts contain energy, creativity, imagination, strategy. But without leadership, that energy becomes anxiety and rumination. With leadership, it becomes clarity and execution. The shift from fighting to leading is subtle but